Hey folks, in this video I'm going to show you how to take a 55-gallon drum and turn it into a rotating composter, but I'm going to do it in a slightly different way than what you typically see that people have converted online, and sometimes you see some people trying to sell them online. But I have a slightly different method which hopefully will be a lot better than what you typically see, so relax and enjoy. It is such a hot day, I decided to bring operations into the garage for the moment. And looking at the side of the barrel, the first thing we're going to do is create an opening for which to put the composter. Now this is similar to how other people do, because the method I want to show you in a moment is the actual rotating part, which I believe will glide a lot better than what you typically see where they put a spoke in the side and try to turn. Now, with that in mind, if it doesn't glide any better, you can always take bolts and screw them in the sides and maybe even connect them with a rail or something. Or you could do your own way using PVC pipes or put fins if you wanted to agitate the material better. But if this does rotate as nicely as I predict, then you would not necessarily need all this, because it would glide so smoothly that it shouldn't necessarily just stay at the bottom, but actually flip around and mix. So with that in mind, we do need to create a door first, and it's going to have to be between this and this. So these two bumps, I don't want the door wider than that. I mean, it would be nice to get even wider, but I feel like it might affect it. So I'm just going to go with this, especially since the hinge I'm using is 12 inches, and this, as you can see, is 12 inches. So to make the door, you're going to want a piano hinge that's 12 inches and a couple of these to go here and there. So I have two, so that you can put a latch to lock it. But I'm not going to be using these screws that came with it. Instead, I'm going to be using bolts, and I'm going to make sure they're secure where the nuts don't fall out and everything with use. So I have to mark where I'm going to cut the opening from. Now, when you look at this, let me rotate this. Right here, you have the seam coming down all the way here across the length where they molded this and stuck two halves together. I'm going to be avoiding that seam. So there's a little dirt, but I'm going to cut away from the seam. So I'm going to mark this. I'm going to draw a line with a marker so I know where I'm cutting from. And I'm going to be measuring from here down to here. I'm going to make it a nice wide opening of 30 centimeters. I know some people are cringing at me using metric, especially since I mentioned inch, but 30. So now I can draw the line here, from here to here. And this is going to be the fun part, drawing this line. Then run it down this way. One of the ways you could do this is drill like a pilot hole and use a hacksaw and cut through there. I can see I went a little askew, so I'll have to compensate there. But I'm going to use a drill, and this is a little jagged. They tell you not to use them, but I'm going to try anyway. I'm going to see if I can cut into it. Is a little hard to do. I'm going slowly too, because I don't want to damage this barrel. And also, you have to consider the width of the blade on both sides. Oops. So this is pretty thick plastic, so I could probably just run those screws through on the hinges. but I'm going to keep going until I cut a slit through this. Before I continue, there is one thing I overlooked, however. It would be a good idea to mark the holes before cutting into it so that you're able to know exactly where to drill. And you could probably even drill the holes before you continue. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I ran the piano hinge and lined it up and marked the holes. So as you can see, they're lined up. And I have this hinge, and I almost forgot. One reason why you do not want to use the screws that come with them is they'll poke through this plastic because they're longer, and they will hold, but they're going to be sharp, and you could scuff yourself. So then I'm going to have this lined up over here, like that. So I'm going to do a hole, 1, 2, let's see, that's a better way to hold it, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to line this up on the other edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I have the holes lined up, and it's so much better to have them cut before drilled before I cut that piece, because imagine once this is cut out, it's going to be hard to line these up. Okay, I have the holes drilled here and here, those just ever so slightly wider. Now I will say, if these holes are a little too tight, it's not a big deal because you can drill it a little wider, but if it's a little too wide, you can't return material back to it. But fortunately, we're using nuts and bolts. But I just want it as snug as I can to make sure I can keep it lasting longer. Okay, so this is almost cut. Finishing touches. Okay, there we go. It's collected some rainwater from just sitting outside, even though it's closed off. But I'm going to see if I can just pull this off. There we go. And now we know which way it goes because of the hardware. So now I can attach this hardware, and then we can build the mount with the rotating device for this. So I made sure I have a washer, and then I can add another washer and then the bolt. So they'll be like this, sealed on, and you want to make sure the bolt's long enough. That is a good thickness, isn't it? But like I said, if I use the regular ones, it will probably hold up to this. However, I foresee it poking me. So we don't want that. So now I'm going to actually attach the hardware to this piece before I work on the other piece. So you can see that these bolts really hold up, and this thing swivels well. And I have a couple nuts there, and I'll show you how I assemble these so they don't fall off. Now, I was short one of these. It was a 12-pack, and I only had 11 bolts in there. So I don't know if one had spilled and fallen on the floor, but I can't seem to find one. So I do not know why I was missing one. I typically try to count the number in the bag, but with all the graphics on the bag, you can't see everything sometimes. But what I'm going to do is, I do not just assemble these. I'll actually put a little Loctite on there. So Loctite is just a brand of super glue. You could use a different brand if you want to, get the cheap stuff from the Dollar Tree. But the reason I put it is so that it does adhere nicely and not fall off. And then I'll basically, I'll use a socket bit, stick it there, and then with a screwdriver, tighten it. And then, you know, some super glue will ooze into the bolt and it will be really tight, and I mean the nut, and then the nut shouldn't get loose over time. So that is how I affix this. So when you look at this, this is holding up. You know, it's going to flex out a little. I don't have the other one, but then when it's latched, it's not moving anywhere. And I did that, as you can see, without even putting those on because it's snug, but I still am going to put these on. So now I have the door to the compost bin finished minus that screw. I could use a different screw, but I don't want a Frankenstein device, so I'm going to eventually go get another screw to put it in. But I have these, so they come up, and I didn't put a hinge here. I could if I want to. And I now have a nice 55-gallon single chamber compost bin that I need to make a rotating device for. Now, what's nice about building your own is you get a much larger single chamber. So instead of buying the ones that are 43 gallons with 2 chambers, you can get a lot more composted this way. So now we have to build the cradle with the rotator. To build the cradle, I have these 5 1x4x8s that I'm going to be cutting down. And these are actually 3/4 of an inch by 3.5 inches wide by 8 feet long. And they are treated for outdoors. So they're not regular lumber, but treated lumber, which is what you want so they can survive the elements. And you could use thicker beams, which is what a lot of people use, but I'm going to be coupling these, and you'll see why with this build. I cut 4 pieces at 4 feet, and I wanted this at a different angle than 45. 45 would be like that, but I wanted it at a 60-degree angle. So on my saw, I adjusted it to 30 because 30 plus 60 is 90. And I'm going to have them like that. So I have this piece of wood to show the base, have them level, and I'm going to have 2 crosses. And I can actually slide this closer or further, assuming that's the base, but you want it wide enough that it's not going to topple over. But I chose this angle versus 45 so I can have it a little taller off the ground to run the wheelbarrow under there. So that's one thing I have to consider, as well as the wheelbarrow height. But also, based on the diameter of the barrel, I could probably go a little bit this way, but I'll have to bring the barrel and see, and then I'll determine, and I'll screw these 2 together. Eyeballing where the barrel will be cradled, it would be like that, and you want to make sure it's set to where when this opens and swings, you still have enough space here. You know, that can go all the way up, but from here to the ground for the height of the wheelbarrow. But one thing I may do in the future, I'm not going to do it at the moment, is put some wheels on this, whether I use casters or regular yard wheels that are big and drill through there. And that should raise the height a little bit more if the wheelbarrow I have is pretty tall. Right now I have an old one which isn't tall enough. I'd like to raise its height or get a taller one. So after I lined this up, you can see I screwed another piece. So basically I am making it 1.5 inches in diameter, but I'm using 2 pieces of wood. And there is a reason why. So let me assemble this and then you will see the reason. Here it is sitting in the cradle. These pieces, I have one here and one on the back, are 28 inches. I have this one at an angle, the other one flatter. And this way, this will be the front where I can open this. But I could have moved this further up so it's easier to access. But you can open and then it just drops down. And you get a wheelbarrow that's under 28 inches wide. And this is plenty high for that. But the catch is it doesn't turn easily. You know, you just have, like, if you're going to keep doing that, it's a lot of work. So I'm going to build a contraption. It will actually make this a little higher as well, but it's going to glide nicely. So using rollerblade tires, you can see this is 76 millimeter. That is 85 or 72. So consequently, when you put them together, you can see that if they are flush against here, there's a little gap because it's only 4 millimeters, which means that's only 2 millimeters longer from the diameter by the radius. So consequently, this curve is more extreme. So I have another one that I believe is 90 millimeters. It's not labeled. You know, this was a no-name brand. And if we do 76 to 90, that's going to be about the same. You see the same gap because it's 4 millimeters. So if I do 72 to 90, and we put it on here, now you see that it's right. So now we have to look at the other side. Looking at the other side, there's now a gap on this side. You see how this tapers, and the way we have it, we can actually push this over if need be. And then we do that. Nope. We do this. That seems to work. So we could do the 72 and the 90 and see how that fares. And if it starts to glide or something, I can alter, but this should make it roll really nicely. So I determined that here I need the 72 and the 72 and the 90 incher. I have a hole drilled down at 1 inch from the end. And what I'm going to do is start with a washer. Then the other one, another washer, and I picked this washer to where it goes on that to clamp so this can still turn with the bearings. So then I'll stick this in here, and since I have that on there, it's like that. Then another washer, the other one, the washer, and the screw. So then I can tighten these, and see these glide. So it's not doing much now because I don't have all of them on there, but I can tighten this and then put them all on in that manner. So here is the finished composter, and you can see it glides nicely, and it's not rolling off. You know, that's one of the concerns, but by taking advantage of the slight curve and putting different size wheels, you manage to get it to sit put without having to do a central spoke and axle and all that kind of stuff. So this is a very simple, not the cheapest build because of these rollerblade tires, but I am now excited that I can finally compost. So I can open this, fill in the material. If it gets full, I can fill in up here, put this back down, seal it, and I may need to figure out a way to lock this from popping out because that screw head, you know, I could probably just take it off and then that will stay put. But there we go. And then when it comes time to remove this, I just pop this open, let it swing down with a wheelbarrow underneath. And if you need to, you can go back here, lift that up, and you're all set. So this is a nice single chamber composter that I can rotate like that to shut. And 55 gallons, so it's bigger than what you typically find, which is about 43 gallons, I believe, is a simple, cheap Chinese brand you find online or Chinese make. It sits taller a little bit, and it's the single chamber as opposed to dual chamber. So you can have an array of these. So each month you can get 55 gallons almost. Well, you're going to have some space in there. Let's say 50 or 40 to 50 gallons worth of compost if you have a nice array of these. So this is the final composter. This ground is sloped, so it's a little askew in this frame, but it still rotates nicely and glides really well, so you could get it to agitate really well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope you're inspired to build your own homemade rotating composter using my design with these rollerblade wheels as opposed to putting a central spoke or anything. Thanks for watching. Happy composting.